Okay, here we are on tape 2 on the development of the psyche information. And we were just finishing up on the other tape, and I was just beginning to talk about how certain kinds of thinking leads to disease, breakdowns, closed-mindedness, and so forth like that. But there is some good news. So far I've talked about a lot of the problems you can have, because if we don't identify the problems, we don't really know how we're going to affect a solution. But there's some good news to the idea that anyone can be helped to some degree. Even if their mind is filled with all sorts of troubles, their thinking's illogical and so forth, anybody can pull it out. It just may take more work for us, some people than others. All he really needs to pull it out is a slow, systematic system of finding new knowledge, building security, and the recognition that it's truly possible. These are very important factors. Let me go over that again. First thing to do is we need to find the knowledge, get access to the knowledge, new knowledge that's going to replace the old. If we currently have a head full of stuff that's just way off track, of course most of us get pretty closed-minded when we think we're being attacked. You know, if somebody thinks we're crazy or sick, and we hang on to stuff. But if you're really serious about growth and trying to do something with yourself, you'll seek out new knowledge. You'll listen to new ideas and find ways of replacing the old knowledge. There also has to be a certain security involved here in knowing what you're doing, that you're okay, that that things can get better, and the recognition that it's really possible to do that. The recognition that it's really possible to do that can very simply come through just the meditation, immersion exercises that we were talking about earlier. Any sort of technique that starts to associate the different parts of the brain and self to the individual. The drawing we have of the little head with the material and the spiritual on it, well, it's necessary that you start identifying each one of those areas. We know what our conscious mind is. That's what we use all the time. You need to find your subconscious mind and learn to identify the feeling so you know where it's at. And you need to, know that it's in there and what it does. You need to understand what your psyche is, that it is a collection of your feelings and thinking and thoughts. It's who you are, basically. It's your persona. You need to discover that you are a spiritual self also. That's harder to do. You have to start practicing exercises through meditation to that point where you can actually feel creation, that little touch of eternity that Billy was allowed to touch when he was on the great spacer ship that we've talked about. You need to find out, if you can develop it long enough, that on the spiritual side we have what's called the we form, the spiritual telepathy, so you can start getting in touch even with other life forms, develop your own keys like we talked about earlier, and get into your own Akashic records, studying perhaps your past life and traumas which are making up your present self. Quite often we carry forward trauma from previous lives which we're not aware is influencing who we are today. And if you feel that there's something in there, if there's obviously something about your character or personality which is preventing you from success, it may lie in these areas. Fortunately, most of the time it's nothing more than just not having the tools, the right equipment, the right understanding of how to develop force of thought, how to start controlling our own thinking. I mean, life is really simply nothing more than just how you think. That's all it really is. So what we need to do, if someone in that particular area where they need development, they're having problems getting going, we just need to give them a push in the right direction. And that, of course, is the purpose and the reason why I make tapes on this type of information. Some of the things I say may be helpful. Some of them you might not have any use for. It's like any other information. But you need to find the things in here that are relevant for you and put them to use. If there are certain things that I say, certain passages that I comment on, certain ideas that I bring up that ring a bell, that ring truth with you, wear that tape out. Go over and over it again and again. Order a new one if you need to. Make a copy. But do whatever it takes to go over and over it until it makes sense to you and it provides you the answers that you need. So that's what I mean about pushing someone in the right direction or being an inspiration. Because you have to heal yourself. You have to fix yourself. Someone else can only give you the guidelines by which to do it. We can only feed you the knowledge. I can be an inspiration perhaps, and other people can be an inspiration to people by virtue of their own successes in life, by virtue of their own mental balance. Perhaps their clarity of thought is what you're looking for. Or maybe it's just a few pieces of information that you need to go on with your own path. So whatever it is, take it from someone else, but don't look to someone else as your mentor, your teacher, your guide, or put any responsibility on that other person for taking care of your problems. We all solve our own problems ourselves. I don't believe at all in anybody else leading us, guiding us, or taking us through life. We are here to share, but we got to define these terms properly. We share and help one another, but the responsibility is where we get into trouble. Someone else is not responsible for your life. It's not a God, an angel, a guide, or anybody else. They don't run your life for you. They are not there to do that. It is your responsibility to learn from the inspiration of these people, take the information, and develop yourself. Most importantly, the main reason is, if you don't learn it yourself, if you don't figure it out step by step and make it part of your life, it doesn't stick. It doesn't become part of yourself. You don't really change, and it doesn't become part of your spirit. There will be no spiritual growth unless you earn it and make it part of yourself. So you have to do that. You can't just take advice from someone else and figure that, okay, I got the advice, all right, I'm going to be different from now on. That's only the beginning. Any information, be it advice, a book, tape, film, whatever it is wisdom that makes sense to you, hopefully, that you can use for your own personal growth. Okay? It's because once a person knows with certainty that he can take control of the path of his own life, his character and his destiny once again rise into being a happy individual. Hope springs eternal. How often have you heard that? Hope springs eternal. It's great. Once you know something's going to work, if you got any new plan in life, all right, anything you're going to start on, maybe it's a new job, a new career, a new romance, whatever it's going to be, do we get excited. Remember the last time you met somebody brand new and that spark happened and you were just off the ground for a few days, you're in love and your feet don't touch the floor for about every 10 feet? We just feel marvelous, don't we? Well, that's because there's great hope in the idea that we're about to achieve great happiness, isn't there? Most of life is pleasure or pain. We're either looking for it or running from it all the time. So, be aware of that, work around that, and strive to be happy, as it says. Tolstoy said, the human lives of his spirit and not of the body. When he knows that and does not devote his life to the body, but devotes it to the spirit, then you can put him in chains and lock him behind bars, but he will always be free. That's a pretty easy thing to understand. Once you are certain about your spirit and you have that reliance and confidence of self, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference what kind of turmoil is going on in the material world around you. You can still be that beaming light, that inspirational force that moves through life, creating your own path and being happy. Here's a new idea for you. During our physical lifetime, the material body serves as a dwelling place for the spirit. Now, most of us in the New World or New Age community are going to agree with that, but if you really thought about it a lot, the dwelling place for the spirit. Where is your spirit? Is it in your foot, your hand, your elbow? Have you ever thought about where it is? Have you ever thought of what it might look like? Have you ever considered what your life force might be? Our bodies are electric. There's a pulsing energy that moves through a body that activates all of our little connectors in our brain, which causes all the chemicals to run through our body and keep it going and performing. Have you ever really tried to meditate on the idea of what a spirit might be? If all of us really are spiritual beings, then how come we're not more aware of it? Well, go looking for that. It doesn't mean it's not there, but ask yourself these questions sometimes and in your meditations and so forth. Go looking for the answers that yourself and you'll find them. Through thinking, our character, the path of our very life, and the spiritual development are engraved. An engraved word here. I've been talking a lot about how we build up the force and we add things to our spiritual self. We do this through finding new knowledge and making sure that it's exactly right. Get things exactly right before we allow it to become part of ourself. Because when we do that, when we bring some new knowledge into our life, research it well. Look at it like you're doing the term paper of your life before you add things to yourself. That's why most of the time we read a book, we just kind of dash across it and go, okay. And we kind of put it in temporary memory. We don't make it part of ourselves because subconsciously we don't have enough information on those ideas yet sometimes to really add it to ourselves, to make an imprint, an impression on our spiritual self. But there'll be a certain point where we've got enough facts about something where it starts to move us and it becomes part of us, and then it makes The material subconscious mind then offers it, so to speak, to the spiritual subconscious mind, your spiritual self over there. It receives the information, and if it's correct, if it's become part of you, it now accepts it. And now that makes a permanent imprint on your spiritual self. And your spiritual self, being the place where all of your accumulated wisdom from lifetimes reside, now moves forward. You've added something to the spiritual energy that not only created your material life, but the one before you, the one before that when there was a different personality, 5 lifetimes back when it was Larry or Bob or Nancy or whatever, and it will also be there for the next material life that some new personality will be using, which is you under a new personality. Think about that for a while. In other words, what you think and so forth becomes a permanent record, not for yourself and for those that are going to go beyond you, and it adds things to the universe itself. Your thoughts don't stop at your ears. They go out into the universe. And depending on if they're thoughts from the material conscious, they're short range on the planet. If they are spiritual thoughts coming from your spiritual self, they almost know no bounds at all, and they race literally through the universe on their own. So we do engrave ideas into our spiritual self. We want to be cautious of that. The power of thought first forms when it's first forming, when we come into the life and so forth, and when we're children. The power of our thoughts first form in ideas of good and evil, or good and bad. And then a will is imprinted and built up inside of our spirit about this is a good thing, that's a bad thing, and so forth. That's where it starts, when we start adding things to our psyche and to our spiritual self when we're young. This creates a will, and there's kind of an agreement then, a type of thinking between the spiritual self and the material self, and it starts deciding, well, this is a good thing, and that's a bad thing, and this is evil, and that's whatever, Seen in logical order, first, the activity of thoughts must be installed before a will can be built up and imprinted for a deed to be accomplished. That means first you have a lot of little thoughts, and as you're accumulating information about something and forming all of your little thoughts, as you keep thinking about a subject, it builds up, it concentrates, and then it begins to be a force within you. It's just like my simple analogy earlier of the woman going shopping. All week long she's thinking about buying those shoes, and by Friday she is into it, and Saturday she is off to the mall. She put a lot of energy into that. Well, the same type of process works when you start putting information in yourself. You build up a will about something. You develop an overall approach to life, an attitude that you use to go through life. And that's done with all these little thoughts that we feed ourselves. Once there is imprinted in the spiritual will, a deed is possible. A newborn baby can't make a decision on buying a new car, has absolutely no information about that. But as he grows up and learns about different things and knowledges, eventually someday he will have enough knowledges which will allow him to make a good decision on buying a car, we hope. Okay? Well, without the knowledge, without all the little thoughts, the will would have never, grown up. If a person has to go buy a car and knows nothing about it, then they have to make the decision based on other factors. If they first study and learn all about cars and so forth, and they make a much more logical decision and a better buying decision when they go to get it, right? So, very simply, get educated before you start feeding things to yourself. Be careful what you feed your spirit. Most importantly in this new age, be careful with some of the information that's flying around. People are making all sorts of claims these days about this, that, and the other, and quite a bit of it I don't believe at all. There are very few people in the New Age community, I think, that are really on target that are saying it correctly. Now, I know most of them mean well, and a lot of them are my friends, but that doesn't mean that I agree with them. I think too often people get overexcited to say, to be, to express or whatever, without clearly thinking through what they're really doing to themselves and the people around them. Thoughts, remember, also put will in motion. When you've made a lot of small thoughts and created this strong will, this attitude about something, then from that point on it's easily triggered. It is not true that the will puts thoughts into action, it's the other way around. Once you have a will built up within yourself, this collection of knowledge about something, so then you form an attitude about something, that's what a will is. At that point, all it takes to trigger it, to bring it to the forward, is a thought. A thought that deals with that information, and wham, all of your feelings and thoughts run to the forefront, your opinions about how you're going to react to something, right? We do that all the time. You know, advertising does that to us. We just finished up an election for a new president, and most all of us noticed, I think, in this ugly political year, how the parties and the advertising companies were trying so hard to control our votes through the use of negative advertising, controls with fear and so forth. They would tell us any sort of crap on there, make up any sort of thing, thinking that most people are going to be motivated to vote because of that. Well, they're triggering the things that are in us. They realize that we are a society that's very sensitive to prejudice, to anger, to value judgments. All they have to do is tell you something nasty about a person, whether it's true or not, and it triggers something in you, some feeling of righteousness that I'm not voting for that guy if he did that. Well, they rely upon that. Well, don't be fooled so easily. They may have lied to you. And they may have lied to you on purpose, knowing full well how easily you can be triggered with a simple thought, and your entire will then race to the forefront and do a predictable thing. Don't be so predictable. Learn to stay right in balance with yourself so you're not so easily controlled by outside influences. The power which the thoughts use as a stimulus does not originate from man. Now here's another big idea for you to chew on. When you call upon your spiritual self to actually do something, it's not entirely just from yourself. The amazing part about the spirit is that it is connected actually to creation. What happens is when you have an idea about something and you allow your spiritual self to come forward to actually respond to something new in life or whatever, deed or action you're about to do, if you allow yourself to bring forward your reaction to this new deed from your spirit, what also happens is the power from that spirit, but it flows into your spirit from the immeasurable expanse of all of the universe. In other words, there is a consciousness throughout the universe of higher life forms and lesser life forms. Higher life forms project much more knowledge, of course, than the lower life forms, but out in the universe, within creation itself, there is a consciousness. And your spiritual self draws off of that. It is connected to it all the time because it is a part piece of it. Our spirit selves are part of creation. They came from it. You were always connected to it. That's my point. The idea is then when you have a problem in life and you need to make a decision, you can use that. And you should know all the time that the force of the universe is available out there to you at any given time. An example would be Uri Geller, who quite often gives demonstrations of spoon bending and so forth before large crowds. Well, Uri Geller himself, at least in his early days, couldn't bend the spoon in the dressing room on his own. What he learned to do is he learned to bend the spoon using the consciousness of the people in the audience. At a certain point, I think he developed on and found out that he could use his own spiritual self to draw off the powers of the universe. And this is what happened quite often with people who are psychic and so forth. They learn, or at least they are drawing off the power of the universe, whether they're aware of it or not. Once they become aware of it, they become even much more powerful. This stems from the vast spiritual abundance of what's called original life, is what Billy calls it. Original life, that's what's responsible for life in the entire universe. Original life is the phrase he uses that refers to the original life force that started the universe that we live in. This mysterious original life personifies the breath of life which universally gives life to everything in the universe. It's in you. That's your life force that keeps you going. Your spiritual self is attached to that force and can be called upon for strength. It can be used for strength of character. It can be used to develop some of our more famous New Age ideas like telekinetic energies and levitation, telepathy. But most importantly, it gives you force of self, strength of conviction, self-reliance, confidence, abilities to see into the future, ability to always tap into the subconscious self. Imagine the ability at any given time to use your spirit to tap into a knowledge bank or a consciousness in the Akashic records to know the answers to things at all times. Sometimes channelers tell us that they're hooked to a great knowledgeable being somewhere where information is just flowing into them. Now, as you know, I don't believe in channeling. I think it's the wrong way to actually use the mind. I believe that channeling is nothing more than euphoric meditation gone bad, that a person's own persona creates these things. Where I've seen some channelers, though, they get back on track and actually develop their spirit to the point where they use the spiritual we form that the Pleiadians talk about, that power of your spiritual self, which really is connected to the creation and the consciousness of the universe. It can also be used at all times to kind of keep an open line to the Akashic records. After a certain period of development of meditation, it's possible to have that line open all the time, where you can call upon information from the Akashic or higher life forces to give you advice about perhaps most anything that you would want to know. Imagine being able to go through life and never really face a difficult problem because everything seems easy to you. It always goes your way. Well, certainly that can be developed. The force of your spirit can become so strong that you are always lucky. The force of your spirit can be developed so strong that you always have the ability to keep an open channel to a larger consciousness in the universe. That is certainly possible. Many people do it with nothing more than thinking properly, thinking in a balanced state of mind, and always thinking with the idea of a mind that they're doing things for the right reasons. Integrity of thought brings it forward. So, this mysterious original life that Billy's calling out here, this life force, that's part of the secret of creation. This is the part of thing man may never fully understand exactly how the creation operates, but now we know that it is there. We know there's a spiritual self there, and we're beginning to find out we're connected to it. And as you practice your exercises of meditation and meditation immersion, you too will feel it. You'll find it in yourself, your connection to it, and then there will be this great feeling of fulfillment and happiness to know that you really are a spiritual being and that you are connected to something much larger and greater than the simple material existence or the environment that you live in. Next thing I'd like to touch on, and something you've got to spend a little time dwelling on, is how we make ourselves sick through wrong thinking. Perhaps you've heard of, late in the past few years, more and more people have come across the idea that how we think actually affects our body. Many doctors are getting onto that. I want to point out one little thing to you here for you to think about along these lines. If we allow ourselves to think improperly, we react to things with rage, anger, depression, so forth. If we get ourselves out of control, let's say you're in a situation somewhere and something happens and it touches part of you that causes rage and anger, and you want to strike out somehow, and you feel suddenly the urge to either defend yourself in a situation, or you feel such hate and anger you might actually pick up something and throw something at somebody. Now, of course, I'm only talking about individuals here which are prone to getting out of control, but we seem to have more and more of those in our society these days. But I use that as an example because I want to point out what happens inside the individual when that happens. While we're in these states of excitement, we promote an overstimulation of the adrenal glands. These are located right over the kidneys. Sometimes we call these the crazy glands. They discharge kind of a digestive matter and overflow the blood with the fighting strength, invigorating chemicals whenever the human prepares himself for some sort of alteration and you need extra strength. So adrenaline pumps into the blood and gets you going, but adrenaline is normally neutralized then. You know, when the anger calms down and you're trying to get yourself back together, well, there's kind of a calming acid solution, a milky acid solution that comes out from the muscles of the body. It soothes us and calms us down. But quite often it's not enough, and there's an extra adrenaline that's left in the body that causes like aggressiveness and this readiness to fight where you just can't calm down. Well, because normally the body is prepared for you to get a little angry and aggressive sometimes, so it can normally secrete this milky solution which will calm you down. But if you get too far out of control, my point is there's too much adrenaline in your blood and you can't calm it down, and it has an effect then. Okay? This can create illness. Adrenaline is only neutralized then when the anger or the fighting is over, whatever's calling it. And then if this calming effect isn't strong enough, it lingers on in the body. What actually happens is that if your inner life, your inside self, your psyche, is living in such an uproar with anger and in turmoil, the muscles are unable to discharge enough of this milky acid solution to smooth out the human. The extra adrenaline causes aggressiveness. You had this tendency to fight. This has an adverse effect on us. Sometimes it'll make your stomach even contract. Your intestines and other organs and nerves have a disquieting effect inside and start reacting to all this extra adrenaline that's in your body. It causes a number of ailments. It'll cause nervous trembling. If you've ever even been like in a fist fight or something, got pushed into it somehow or whatever, you find yourself just trembling and out of control, that's what's going on. Headaches, dizzy spells, liver, kidney ailments, gallbladder problems. It can cause digestive troubles, ulcers, constipation, diarrhea, any number of sort of things. My point is that when we find ourselves living out of balance, not living spiritually, allowing ourselves to get carried away because of material aggression problems, hate, anger, and so forth, that chemically we actually do damage our body. That since there is not enough calming acid secreted by the muscles, the extra adrenaline left over in the body gets into the blood and causes slowly these build-up, these ailments. And for a person who regularly gets angry or hostile or violent, something like that, they're going to get sick. These are not going to be happy, long-living people. So it should be obvious that to avoid these many kinds of illnesses, we need to learn to control our thinking so we don't get caught up in these moods. A person who lives a spiritual life would never happen to. They would walk away from any situation like that, or they can very calmly look at a situation. Professional people learn this. If you find somebody in the professional walks of life who is continuously in front of the public or in dealing with crowds of different types and so forth, they learn to listen to information and let it kind of bounce off of them. They see it just exactly for what it is. I'm reminded of Ross Perot once, and he was on a Peter Jennings show, and he was attacked by several members of the audience with some very irrational statements that were obviously only being said out of hate and anger to try to hurt his feelings and make him look bad on television. Peter Jennings, which I thought was interesting, seems to allow this and even chose the people that said it. So it doesn't say much for him either. But all this hate and anger was directed at Ross Perot. Well, being ever bit the mature, developed individual, he did not react to it in anger. He did react to it in anger. He did not lash out at the individual with anger. He very calmly dealt with the situation and continued on with his explanation, very much in control of himself. Not that it probably wasn't a little upsetting to him when he was first attacked, because that often happens to us in some places where somebody says something very unkind about you. Most of us will usually get embarrassed and just walk away or feel hurt. But there's no need for that either. We need to learn to see things as they are, see that someone was actually attacking you for some irrational reason, and not allow yourself to either get hate, anger build up inside of you, or not allow yourself to feel depression either. Because even that is harmful to us. Anytime we're way out of balance one way or the other, then we are causing ourselves problems on the inside, both in our psyche and in our physical body. Okay, another interesting little thing to talk to about here is the aura. Some of you may have heard that we have auras. Lately, the last year or two, I noticed that you go to some of these expos and so forth, and there will be people there taking pictures of your aura. Well, this came about years ago, I believe at UCLA. Many years ago, they discovered through a Russian technique called Kirlian photography that using certain types of film, they could actually get a picture of some sort of magnetic field of energy around the body. And commonly this will extend out a few inches, maybe up to a foot on some people, and it has different colors in it. And for a while, nobody had any idea what this is. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what it is based on what Billy has told me. Everyone has a field of spiritual force around himself. This reflects your intellectual greatness and your thinking about yourself. It's projected by your psyche and your spiritual self. This aura can be interpreted in the field of good or bad, as related to the thinking of the individual. In other words, within the aura, certain colors can be read, and you can see how people respond to things, if they agree, if they think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It reflects failure or successes, because it always radiates in accordance with how you're thinking. If you could see the aura all the time very vividly, like on videotape or something, and you talk to a person and ask them a number of questions and put them into different moods, maybe use lighting and so forth and cause them to feel, lighting and music and get them into a happy mood or a loving mood or a romantic mood and made them feel really good about themselves. And then maybe you said you would see certain things in their aura which reflect that. If you caught that same person in a kind of an angry, upset, frustrated mood, then you would see different colors in the aura. So the aura is capable of reflecting and demonstrating the mood that we are in and the knowledge that we have. Now, when we go to use our aura for healing someone else, remember that the aura actually is a magnetic field. There are waves of electronic impulses in that field. So when you are attempting to help someone else, what kind of mood do you want to be in? If you think you're going to loan your aura, so to speak, and merge your aura with someone else, either with your hands or however you're going to do it, in order to be a beneficial to a sick person, what kind of mood would you want to be in that would cause your aura to be in a certain state? Well, naturally, you'd want it to be in a healthy one, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want to be angry or upset or frustrated or depressed or something, because then that will reflect in your aura. That will reflect in the energy, the magnetic field around your body, and that's no good for somebody else. Likewise, you don't want your ego to get out of control, thinking you're really hot stuff, and you're going to, I'll fix you up, I can heal anybody, that sort of attitude. I'm wonderful, I'm a psychic, I do this for a living, I know what I'm doing, I read a book on it, whatever it may be. I've run into people like that think they are just, God's gift to the healing world. All they have to do is be around you and everything will be wonderful. Well, that would be great if it was true, but most times these people aren't at all. They just think, they do whatever they're going to do, and if you don't respond, they say, well, it's a problem with you. There's something wrong with you that normally works. I don't understand it. So we do have an aura. It is a magnetic field. It does reflect our feelings and thoughts. It also reflects our intelligence. It also radiates the reflections of things like love, hate, satisfaction or dissatisfaction. You can read greed, envy, vice, passion, grievance, despair, doubt, revenge, need, which is a biggie in our society, misery, courage, fear, loyalty, humility, happiness, understanding, balance, energy, and realization. All of these things can be determined and read in an aura once a person is astute and knows exactly what to look for. So an aura is a reflection of how you're thinking at the time and a reflection of the knowledge, the intelligent knowledge that is within you. If you want to have a little fun with that sometime, get a picture of your aura taken. I believe there are certain Polaroid films that capture it, but you want to make sure that it's not being faked. I've seen some people that are just taking lights and flashing lights right onto your body and causing whatever colors to come out just for kind of entertainment value. But if you get an opportunity to actually have it done with someone who has a good process, who knows what they're doing and is using the right equipment, it can be very fascinating to actually see your aura. There are many psychic people who can see your aura, whose eyes they are tuned to sensitive frequencies in the air, and they can actually see your aura in certain conditions. And if you can find someone like that, who that you can trust to be honest and so forth, and not try to just hustle you for some money, find someone like that who knows what they're really doing, and have them tell you all about your aura, the colors, how thick it is, how far it extends out from the body. Learn to understand a little bit about it, and then perhaps you can maybe learn to even see your own aura. Then you would know more about yourself all the time and be able to know how you're responding. Well, here's an interesting idea for you. I got another thought for you. Imagine what it would be like if we could get everybody on the planet now to listen to all these ideas, to learn how to meditate, to study and learn more about themselves, to use meditative immersion to develop and learn about themselves and start reprogramming their thoughts, to learn new knowledge about things and put it into your spiritual self so your personality and character changes. At a certain point, suddenly integrity is going to go up, isn't it? Pretty soon there's far less concern for the material things in life. There's less worry. There's less need and fear. Suddenly everybody's kind of reasonably happy and getting along well. Now, what would it be like if the whole world thought like that? My. Well, just think about these ideas for a little bit. One, there would be an end to religions. There would be no more war. We would have no more, discord and arguing among ourselves. There wouldn't be any more hunger, because we'd care so much about each other that we would feed each other. Plus, people that are well balanced and so forth will learn to take care of themselves. Quite often, many of the people in nature that are starving and hungry and so forth, quite often it's because they just don't take any responsibility for their own lives. Or maybe they're just not able. That's also the case. The financial industry would probably disappear, because economics, which is really kind of a lousy idea when you get to thinking about it, it was obviously designed by a handful of rich people somewhere, because it doesn't really serve the lower classes. It was designed by rich people for control. So it's going to have to change. Probably within 50 to 100 years, economics may actually even disappear on the planet, because it's not really an equitable system that provides quality of life for everyone. So we'll come up with a better system somewhere. We would probably stop manufacturing equipment for war. There wouldn't be any demand. We wouldn't be at war with each other if we all looked at each other as spiritual beings on our own path. If prejudice, hate, and anger kind of dissipated and went away, certain businessmen could no longer launch their dirty schemes. The so-called New York bankers and the Bilderbergers and all of these guys, the big money power people of the world, who really pull the purse strings and make the world jump, well, they wouldn't have a job anymore. They probably wouldn't even know how to react in life if they didn't have their money. There'd be no more popes, priests, politicians, rabbis, gurus, or bishops. What would they do for a living then? All right, so much for daydreaming about the perfect world. There is one way we can start causing our world to move towards a more euphoric state of mind, though. I shouldn't say euphoric. I always used to think of euphoric like we did when we were a kid, when we euphoria, like a city somewhere where everything is perfect. Okay. But there are ways that we can cause, even individually, we can start causing things. We can start causing things to get better on our world, and that has to do with our thoughts also. Because I want you to be aware of something else here. Be aware that your thoughts, even though they're not heard audibly, do radiate beyond your aura. They affect plants, animals, and other people around you. Now, what I'm talking about is when you create a thought in your mind, and there's some force put into it, that thought actually creates an electrical charge in your brain. That electrical charge actually, depending on where it comes from in your brain, if it's from your conscious or your spiritual self, has a certain range to it, a distance to it. And when that thought leaves your mind and moves outside of your body, it goes beyond your aura. It affects out into the aura and is reflected in the aura as you think, but it goes beyond the aura also. So if you think and radiate evil, hate, anger, distrust, or whatever, this goes out into the world and it affects everybody around you. There is a consciousness. There is kind of like an open party line, an open telephone line among all people at the subconscious level. For instance, ask anybody who was around Los Angeles during the riots, when tens of thousands of people rose up in anger and were rioting and were burning buildings and, trying to harm one another. Well, that certainly flows out into the consciousness of the people. Many people, I'm sure, if you ask them, could feel that in their own subconscious. It has an effect. There are over 5 billion people right now alive on the planet Earth. All of those people, very few of them have any respect for the planet itself. They don't even think about the planet. And this has to be a contributing factor into some of the natural disasters and problems that we're going to be facing in the future. Let's think about earthquakes, problem with lower life forms, microspecies. Let's think about problems we might have among the animals and so forth. Maybe we're causing some of that. Maybe we get to a point of population where society is so out of control, there's so much anger and war going on, which we're getting close to if you just watch the news today. All of those thoughts out there create so much fear, prejudice, and so forth, they affect all of us. Well, fortunately, you can protect yourself from conscious thoughts, material conscious thoughts, because those are what Billy calls just primary telepathy. It's on the material side of the mind. Thoughts created by the material consciousness and so forth, you can block against them. You can put up strong feelings of self-protection, of happiness, of love and light around yourself. It's a very powerful force. You can tell yourself daily that I am protected by an aura of love and charm and happiness, and it serves well. Because remember, our aura all around us reflects how we think, right? Well, if you are invaded by outside influences and thoughts that affect your subconscious mind and come in and might make you feel just a little down, a little depressed, or a little fearful of all the things that are going on out there, if you feel that trigger happen, if you feel a little down, stop for a few moments, meditate on the idea of power and love, of universal love. Change your aura to being an aura of strong strength, of love and light, and it becomes forceful. You become very powerful. Within just seconds or minutes, you'll feel your powerful feeling of confidence and self-reliance come back, and the outside world then will bounce off of you. You'll be able to perceive it then from a very balanced viewpoint, and you will also perceive the sadness and all the problems and the anger out there more correctly. You will not respond to them then with any sort of hate or anger, but you will also be giving off your own feelings of unconditional love back to these people who are suffering out there. After all, we must start looking at people that if they're full of hate and anger and whatever they're doing out there, they're very unhappy. And let's don't look at them as something to strike back at. Let's look at it as another spirit which has been misled. It's another spiritual person just like ourselves who's having problems in life. Even if they may appear to be violent or whatever, these are the people that really need our love and really need our help. These are the people who are out of control. These are the people who need inspiration. These are the people who need our help and our inspiration to show them what is correct, how to live properly. And through ourselves, using ourselves as role models, we can do that. You know, if you find 5 or 6 people that are like a gang or something, you could handle a gang. You could talk to people in a gang, explain the concepts we're talking about, of how to develop happy thinking through power of self and meditation and so forth. At first they're going to laugh at you. You got to expect that. But if you get a chance to work with these people, slowly there will be a breakthrough. If you can get them to calm down, even start with some simple breathing techniques to just breathe, and so forth, and calm themselves down. And then maybe separate them a little bit so that their collective consciousness, which contributes to their anger, is dissipated somewhat. Get them alone individually and they lose some of that violent strength. Get them alone and start calming them down, and then start teaching them some things. Provide them with some new knowledge, some new things to think about. Show them some new ways. And over a period of time, you could bring that person back into being a happy, well-balanced person. Think of all people in the world as happy, balanced, spiritual people, because the spirit itself never gets out of balance. It's always in there. It never gets illogical. So think of them as their spirits out there, that they're trapped somehow inside of some sort of body that's gone crazy. That this material body out there is infected like with a spiritual disease. So we have to look at them like they just need some help. And what is help to a person who spiritually is trying to defend themselves? Most common help is just to offer them your unconditional love, your logic, your clarity of thinking, so they can sort their problems out. All right, one other thing I want to touch on here is called power thinking. That's a phrase that Billy uses in his book, Power Thinking. He says, since thoughts can be so powerful and not affect ourselves but the world around us, they are the most powerful form of energy there is. He says, remember that the creation started the whole universe with only a thought, which manifested itself into matter and created all there is. So thought is very powerful. No one can really resist a healthy, purposeful, and strong thought. You know, and in any argument or discussion you get into, the last word is usually the person who has the most clear, well thought out, logical statement which brings the argument to a conclusion, the last word on the subject. A good thought is usually filled with what he calls the absolute awareness of the unity with creation. In other words, when you are aware that you are part of creation, that you are connected to it, and you speak from the Spirit, then you are actually speaking with the highest possible logical mind that you can at the time. That's a good thought. Correct power consciousness and positive thinking dissolves all of your difficulties. Well, it does. We've talked about, how you can make yourself feel ill with poor thinking. Likewise, you can also make yourself feel very well with correct thinking. So you also want to learn to control the size of your problems. If you think of them as small, they are. If you start concentrating on a problem and causing it to enlarge and put a lot of energy into your problem, it'll swell up inside of your thinking, kind of like a storm, and it becomes very difficult to knock it down. The strength of thinking and the application of power thinking requires an education. At first it can seem a little difficult because it's new and seems a little bit strange, but you do actually get used to it. Actually it's very easy. Once you start the simple and correct ideas in motion, your thinking will kind of begin to flow. Things move very quickly inside of your mind when you actually do something on purpose. The whole instrument of thinking, the whole concept of the way that your mind works will change very rapidly to accommodate new forms of thought. It seems to like it. Once you offer your mind some food, your subconscious some food, it takes to it very quickly. All the equipment, associated with the brain, your neural connectors and everything, they all seem to change like an energy level, and they transform kind of like an electric transformer somehow. You get this shot of energy going through your brain. It's just a short time until power thinking takes over and becomes the norm. Now, of course, practice makes a master out of anyone, so if you practice this idea of power thinking, it becomes a habit. Power thinking, of course, is nothing more than the developing of the power of the spirit by continually concentrating and reinforcing thoughts that are correct and logical. And as you do that, you think stronger and stronger about things, and you develop a force of your spirit. You become a power thinker. Okay, end of tape. See you on the other side. Of the Billy Meier interview, taken in January of 1989 by myself. First man came to be on the planet Earth. Well, hello. We're back on the final side here of development of the psyche. We just finished up on the other side talking about what I deem power thinking. That is my term for it. The concept there was that through concentration of clear thought, we can develop a stronger will and thus become powerful thinkers where we are actually in control of our thoughts all of the time. Most people, unfortunately, are not. We are a planet of over 5 billion people, like 5,400,000,000, something like that. Most of them are not in control of their thoughts. Very few people are, as a matter of fact. Most people just go along with their conscious mind, not aware that their subconscious is even there, or what it's doing, or what kind of plans are going on. We just fall kind of the mercy of our experiences that we have. And we build up all of our emotions and attitudes and so forth, our pre-programmed responses to life. These all build up, and that's how we respond. Then we find ourselves, halfway down through the road of life, feeling depressed or negative, or things aren't going our way, and we're wondering how we're going to be successful, or we're really wondering what success is. Is it a lot of money, a lot of love, a lot of happiness? Most people can't even give you a clear answer. Unfortunately, the society we're in isn't very clear on that either. You can't really get a straight answer out of anybody. Most people, I think, would, at least in America, tend to think that a successful life would be one that has a lot of money, a lot of material things. After all, America is founded on the principle of capitalism, the idea that money rules the world, and that if you have money, you can get the stuff. If you don't have the stuff, then you're not doing very well. We see bumper stickers that say things like, he who has the most toys when he dies wins, things like that. So capitalism, or the acquirement of material thing, is greatly promoted in this country. Which one thing, it's led us to be prosperous, we call it, because we enjoy a higher quality of material life here than the rest of the world does. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are the happiest people. It doesn't necessarily mean we are the people of most love and compassion. And I think the last few years you'd find a lot of Americans questioning exactly what state we are in. We've just gone through the 1992 elections, and for the most part, the majority of the people in the United States are beginning to understand that we need change. We have to do something about our systems, our social system, our economic system, and our system of politics are not serving us currently today. And people are finding out that we're going to have to get involved to change it. And that if we don't do anything about the political system and the economic system, those that are running it for their own benefit will continue doing so, and it will keep going down the same path that it is. Well, if we want to take our country back and increase the quality of life here, we have to start getting involved, don't we? It's the same way with your own mind. If you want to increase the quality of your personal life, you have to start becoming responsible for how you think. So consequently, you will want to develop what I call power thinking. Interestingly enough, when you think, here's a concept that most of you probably haven't thought about, and I want to introduce an idea to you called the boomerang. And this is not a handheld device that you're going to throw in the air, but it works kind of like that. You know, a boomerang, for those of you who are not real familiar with it, it's a little device that they use in Australia, and actually I think was originally designed for hunting. And it looks like a little piece of wood that's bent in the middle, so it's kind of in a V shape. And you grab one corner and throw it out real hard, and it goes out spinning in the air, and then it comes back. It hits the air, it turns around and comes back, and you can grab it again. That's called a boomerang. So the idea is that it's something that can be sent out and come back. Well, the reason I brought this up is that thoughts can be sent out, and they do come back. Now, most of us are content to think that as we think, no one hears it, right? And it probably doesn't have any effect on anybody else. As a matter of fact, we don't know if telepathy for sure even exists. Maybe it's just something in the movies. And most of us walking around harboring all sorts of thoughts in our mind that we would be embarrassed to death to have anybody else hear. Imagine how it would change the world if suddenly tomorrow at noon everybody on the planet was very, very telepathic and able to listen to everybody else's thoughts. Why, we'd all be scrambling like crazy to hide all of our little private stuff. Plus, we'd have to learn a whole new method of how we talk to one another, because our true feelings would really come out. I would probably eliminate politics, wouldn't it? Well, we're not all going to become telepathic tomorrow. However, our thoughts, which may be a surprise to a lot of you, do not just stay within your own mind. When you think a thought, if you may remember 8th grade science, all those little connectors inside of your brain, all those little neural connectors, dendrites, synaptic junctions, and so forth. When we make a thought, there's actually an electrical charge formed in the brain. It affects the chemicals in your body. They receive the electrical charge, and that affects all the cells in your body. But there is an electrical charge formed. So our mind does create energy, you might say. When we think, there's a very small, minute charge. And depending upon the force of thought, that charge may vary in intensity. The thing here to bring out is the fact that once you create that thought, it doesn't stay just in your mind. It actually goes out into the universe. It leaves your mind, goes beyond your skull, and goes out into the universe. Now that thought, by the way, when it goes out, will return also to your mind. Now here's some interesting things. A thought, when you think it, isn't necessarily exactly what you think it is. We all have thoughts like positive and negative thoughts. We think about a positive thought is something that we think about love or happiness, or a positive thought may be a reaffirmation of our self-reliance or our confidence. Or we have a positive thought about how we walk, a dress, or so forth, how we think about ourselves. Negative thoughts could be thoughts of depression, anxiety, hate, anger, and so forth. There's a lot of that in the world. Prejudice. So thoughts, when we think them, we can generally always define them as either a positive thought or a negative thought. And then right in the middle somewhere would be like neutral, where the thought really just didn't have any charge at all to it. It was just kind of a neutral thought with no positive or negative attached to it whatsoever. But for the most part, thoughts are positive and negative because everything in the universe is good and bad, moral, immoral, off and on, plus or minus, whatever. That's just the way things work. When you think a thought, and let's say it's a very positive thought, and you send it out, it goes out into the universe, whether you're aware of it or not. At a certain point, it will reach its maximum distance that it can travel by virtue of its concentration and its energy. And when it gets out there, it affects things along the way, because thoughts are energy and they are perceived and felt by other subconsciouses. So that thought will go out a certain distance, and then something unique happens. It's polarized. It's kind of like a magnet. If you send a thought out, it comes back almost in an opposing form. If it's a very positive thought, it comes back in kind of a negative form. And here's what I mean by that. A thought is actually composed of two things. To begin with, a thought is composed, one, of the actual information, what you're thinking of, and two, it's composed also of the energy it took to hurl that thought out into the universe. So we have two parts here. We have the actual information or thought that you think of, and then we have the energy it took to throw that thought out into the universe. When the thought goes out, that positive thought that you've created goes out into the universe, the boomerang effect comes into place. The thought will reach its maximum distance, and it will then come back to you. It's the same thought. The thought itself doesn't change, but the energy form which is carrying it or hurling it away changes. So if it was a very positive thought, it will now be changed to a negative charge and come back into you. And that thought literally slams back into your mind. When it does then, we find that even though the information comes back the same, it's producing a slightly different effect in our mind. And when it comes back in now as a negative form with a negative charge, that means almost that this thought comes back in and forces us to reconsider that same thought, perhaps from a slightly different viewpoint, maybe from more of a negative angle. Likewise, if we were to send out a very negative thought out there and send that out, it would come back in negative form. The same information would come back, but probably with a different consideration, different view, because it has the charge is slightly different now. So the thought itself goes out and comes back, but the energy by which carries it polarizes and returns the opposite polarization. Okay? So what we're working for here in our evolution is the fact that we can send thoughts out, and we can send them out positive. They'll come back, forcing us probably to consider them kind of from a negative viewpoint. We then put our mind to work, start crunching away and thinking about this idea, and that forces growth. You see, the universe has to be negative and positive all the time. If everything was really good, then there wouldn't be any way of learning. It would just be like stagnation. But the creation itself is constantly evolving, and so are we. And this is the learning process. This also starts to begin to point out the fact that how valuable an open mind is. If you send thoughts out all the time, if you're negative about everything that goes out all the time, and you refuse to consider any positive sides to an argument or any other positive information about that, you become very closed-minded. Then your learning is stagnated, right? Because if you refuse to consider any other viewpoint, like you know all there is to know now, that's it, I'm a know-it-all, well, that stumps your growth. So an open mind is actually a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of clear thinking. It's a sign of growth. If a person does continue to think negative, maybe they're the type of person that's always saying, oh, I can't do that, or that's too difficult, or oh, I'm just never successful at those sort of things. Just can't handle it, or they're always depressed, things just don't go my way. No, I don't want to go out. I'm just going to stay home and watch TV. They just kind of get a poor, sad, woe is me view towards life. Well, as they continue to reinforce that type of thinking, what are they doing? They're programming their brain to believe it. Their subconscious now believes it, and that's who they become. So the effects of this negative thinking then really pull them down, almost does not allow them at all to consider anything positive about their life, because they're convinced there just couldn't be anything positive. So they're not paying any attention at all to this boomerang effect that's actually going on. The boomerang effect, you have to learn to sense it. You have to learn to watch for it. Thoughts will come back very quickly, at least within 3 days. And when they come back, if you're open to it, if you program yourself to pay attention and feel for it, it means that you may send a thought out, and when it comes back, it'll come back in kind of the form like to be able to consider that thought from an opposing viewpoint or slightly different attitude towards it. And if you can do that, then that's what growth is all about. You consider things from different directions and allow other information to come in. Real positive thinking is actually neutral positive. When you have a balance between your positive thinking about something and your negative, when you've considered all the different viewpoints, and then you come to kind of a neutral point of view, but you've considered everything, that's what positive thinking actually is. Positive thinking isn't just thinking everything always positive, because you're not considering the other viewpoints then. So you're not really learning anything. You're only considering your viewpoint. So allow negative thoughts and positive thoughts to come along, and that really translates to mean considering both sides of things. Be open-minded and learn that your real positive thinking is what happens after considering both sides. You reach conclusions that allows you to balance out the positive and the neutral. In other words, anyone can actually learn to control their thinking and control their life. paying attention and learning to observe the boomerang effect that happens in our mind all the time is a method by which we can start to monitor our thoughts and understand how we think. Well, I've talked a lot about thinking and power. What all this leads to, really, if you'll remember the diagram from our material side and our spiritual side, is that a person who has a stricken or sick psyche is a person who is thinking improperly or illogically, and over a period of time their psyche, which is our feelings, our persona, our thinking about things and so forth, our sensitivity to the world, our viewpoint, our approach, our attitude, our paradigm, all these things fall within the realm of what a psyche is. When our psyche's got to the point where it's sick, that means a person who has continually, through reinforced negative thinking, is creating illness in the psyche. Okay? That has to be changed. And that's not real simple, but it's quite possible. If a person has found themselves in a particular point in life where there's been so much reinforced negative thinking year after year, even though it might be slight, it just builds up. It gets reinforced. The psyche then, and let's think of the psyche then as really our viewpoint of the world, our approach to life, how we view the world. At that point, our psyche then becomes ill, which means that the psyche just has a negative or sick sort of viewpoint of life. It can no longer think healthy, happy, positive, lively, lovely. It's not capable of the beautiful thought, of the positive thought. It cannot create a happy future for itself because it is convinced that life is negative, life is not good. Well, we have to do something about that, though, because the negative, here's what happens. When we go about fixing a stricken psyche, we'll call it stricken or ill psyche, if we find ourselves in that position or someone else, how do we fix it? How do we cure a stricken psyche? Well, to begin with, to refer back to our diagram of the material and the spiritual, let's be reminded of one thing, how the mechanism works. The conscious mind gathers the information. It very quickly then checks with the subconscious mind to see what data we have on that. The subconscious mind is the computer, the motor, how we do things, our working machinery that helps us create our logic. The subconscious mind is a storehouse, the memory block of all of our experiences that we have in our material life. So by virtue of that, it develops its own will, its own attitudes, emotions, and feelings about, not feelings, but attitudes about things. It has knee-jerk response. It's your inventory of data on stuff. So a thought comes in, say someone comes up to you and says, would you like to donate $50 to this worthy cause here? We're going to save this special tree that grows out in the forest. And maybe you have an attitude about trees or whatever. That attitude comes forward and your subconscious responds. If you have a very negative attitude about a lot of things, your overall will or your overall subconscious reaction to things becomes very negative. If you've reached a point where you view the world negatively, then your subconscious reacts to everything that way, and every time you're presented with new information or something in life to confront, you're going to react negatively. Of course, you won't think so. That's just who you are. But to the outside world, it will be easy to spot you. Well, when your psyche becomes stricken, the problem is that we can start to change how we feel about things and our attitude about life and our psyche. We can, but the problem is your subconscious is going to have to want to play a part in that all the time. So we have to stop that. We have to learn to curb the constant negative attitude of our own subconscious, which we've programmed over the years all the time. See, that's a result of constant worrying and negative thinking all the time. It builds up this power. Power thinking becomes negative. The consciousness of the stricken psyche must start to control the subconscious until the subconscious acknowledges the way of thinking of the consciousness as a knowledgeable fact. That means we've got to persuade, or we have to reprogram the subconscious somehow. And we're going to have to find a way of doing that. Because the subconscious ultimately dictates the feelings of the psyche. And we've got to make the psyche healthy by reprogramming the subconscious. And that's not real simple. And in fact, it's kind of difficult because every time we try to think in a more positive fashion or in a happier fashion, a happier thought, the subconscious is going to send out all of its negative thoughts. After all, it's just loaded with them. So every time you would try to daydream or, try to have a positive approach to something, your subconscious is going to beat it down. Now, if you've ever talked to someone who basically has a negative view of life or just isn't getting anywhere, it's exactly what you find, isn't it? If you know someone, exactly what you find, isn't it? If you know someone and you're trying to encourage them maybe to do something in life or start a new career, say for instance, and you're explaining to them, oh, you're going to be good at it, you're qualified at this, why don't you sign up and take a course in that, learn something about it, and you can better yourself. And they're sitting there going, I don't know, well, I don't have the money for the class, and well, I don't have a way to get there, my car doesn't work very good, and well, a friend of mine took that class and they didn't do very good. What's happening here? Every time you try to suggest a positive thought to change their view of their life, that built-up view that's in their psyche, what's happening? The subconscious keeps emerging with a whiny negative attitude why they can't do it. So we have to break through to this person somehow. We have to break through and start reprogramming them with positive thoughts until the subconscious starts getting some new programming, catches on, finally dumps or gets rid of all of its negative attitudes towards everything. We have to convince this person or teach this person about the power of themselves. They have to learn to find that self-reliance and the confidence. You cannot do it for them. You can lead them along with logic, with clarity of thought, and you can explain to them how it's possible. Another problem is that people generally, when they become negative, they think it's insurmountable. They think their problem is so big that there's just no way to fix it. If you're trying to suggest to this person that they start a new career or whatever, and they have 30 minutes of reasons why it isn't going to work, I haven't got the money, oh, I probably couldn't get a job anyway, or it's too far to drive, or I don't have Wednesday nights free. They got all these reasons why they can't do this thing, right? Well, they just can't get a positive thought together. You got to find some way to get this person to want to start thinking positive about putting themselves together. Well, there's one thing you can suggest to them, and this works. If you are a person who's not too far gone, where you can actually get the will together to try to change the way you think, suggest to them that they daydream. The best neutral positive thinking is a daydream. Now, a daydream, this is what I mean by a daydream. A daydream is where you just sit down and focus on some fantasy or some positive thing. Allow yourself to get lost in the daydream. And this is the kind of daydream where everything goes your own way. Where you just lead these people in and explain to them they need to daydream about a wonderful life, beautiful things, love, a great fantasy is something that they really enjoy. And what happens here when that starts doing that? Well, this person will experience something a little bit different, won't they? They'll start catching on to the idea that things can go well for them. They'll at least start enforcing the thought idea that they can't have a positive thought. It might even be surprising to some people who aren't used to doing that. Another thing about the daydream should always be in the present tense. And by that I mean, don't daydream about what may be someday. If you have the kind of daydream where you're wishing that, gee, maybe in 3 or 4 years I could take that class, or maybe someday I could get the money together to do that, what's happening? The subconscious is creeping in and creating that negativity. Because they're not looking at it as something positive they could really do, they're turning this daydream into just one more negative approach. So the daydream is always in the present tense. It's right now. I am doing this. I am feeling good. I am happy. I am strong. I am going to class. I can do this. Keep everything in the present tense. I am thinking positive about this course. I'm going to better myself. Look at things that you're going to do right now on the spot, because that way you keep the subconscious from negatively knocking down what's going on. If you think in this future wish mode way, the subconscious will keep coming back with a negative solution or reason why you can't do something. So don't do that. Keep your daydream in the present tense. Remember, logic is built on certainty, not illogical thinking. Now, certainty is the ability to think clearly about something right now and build power in it, isn't it? We talked about how to develop power of your thinking. So if you're correcting a stricken or ill psyche, daydreaming is a good way of doing it. Keep it in the present tense and encourage or learn how to develop positive thinking. what will happen is, as you continue the daydreaming, and as you continue the fantasy about right now how good things are, how swell you are, pretty soon what happens is your subconscious starts catching on. It starts slowly getting reprogrammed. It starts slowly learning that it can handle positive thoughts, and there'll be kind of a breakthrough slowly with the individual where they'll find kind of a light, at the end of the tunnel, and they'll start saying, well, I guess it wasn't quite so bad. And if they keep trying to reaffirm positive affirmations of themselves and start hanging out with different people, get around positive people, get around successful people, get around people who have strong force of mind, change their friends, their environment, and so forth, their world will change. And it can happen very fast. Sometimes it can happen within days with people that really don't have a big problem. Some people may take several months. Some people may not have as big a problem as they thought. Maybe they're just lonely. All they really need is a new relationship or something. They just perk right up. We've all seen people that suddenly we see them and boy, how they've changed. They just seem to be all perky and alive. Might have only been one or two events in their life that were really holding them back. Okay, in Billy's book on the psyche, he has a couple of things in that are kind of interesting. One are the 3 golden rules of positive thinking, and another that he called the 10 laws of health or something. There's like the 10 ideas of good spiritual health. I thought these would be interesting, and so I want to go over them with you and explain to you how he wrote them out. The 3 golden rules of positive thinking. If the 3 golden rules, by the way, if you stick to these 3 golden rules, Billy says you can expect results right away, perhaps with your problems within 3 to 7 days in average cases. If you don't really have too many difficulties, maybe just a few minutes or an hour of just thinking like this, and you'll perk right up. If you got a lot of serious problems, you may have to really stick to these things for several months. One is the first golden rule is what I was just going over, which is the daydreaming. Get a good daydream that allows fantasies and imagination, building castles in the sky, whatever it is. Learn to daydream well and develop good role models for yourself. Create pleasure in your life. Daydream that things right now are going well for you. See yourself as having a great time, a beautiful romance, a beautiful relationship. There's love in your life. Imagine these things that happen because you're starting to enforce the idea that this can be you, that this is you, that all you really need is forceful thinking, strong will. As you think, so you shall be. Okay? You'll find right away that it gives you kind of lift in your emotions and you feel a little more lighthearted when you get the weight of negative thinking off of you. Focus on positive daydreaming, focus on positive fantasies and role modeling about yourself, and you forget all about your problems. At a certain point when you're able to push the subconscious negative thinking out of your mind, you'll feel better. And you'll just kind of come out of the fantasy going, whew, that felt good, and you'll want to go back there. Well, don't hang out there forever. It's just a way of, getting yourself back together. So just keep working at it until you break up the ability of the subconscious to keep sending you negative thoughts all the time. Pretty soon the daydream will override the negative thoughts from your subconscious, and they'll just break apart and disappear, and you'll develop a new viewpoint of life. Your psyche will change. Number 2 on his list is always wear a smile, even if things seem sad or depressing. The point here is that, and the Chinese used to teach this years ago, if you have a smiley outside, even though you may have problems inside, it does lead to a connection at some point where the smiley, happy persona you're carrying around does have some effect. So if you're a person wanting to keep yourself in good humor and so forth, he suggests keeping a happy smile all the time because it promotes a positive way of thinking. And you have to learn to reinforce that positive thinking. Another thing which most people don't think about, which is his 3rd golden rule of positive thinking, is your posture, your material self. Keep good posture. It's interesting how poor posture not only reflects poor thinking and poor attitudes, but when you talk to these people, they're probably making themselves sick. So keep a good posture, and that means keep your head up high, your shoulders back. It speaks well for your attitude, self-reliance, confidence, and your material self definitely has effect on how you're thinking, and vice versa. So make a point when you find yourself slumping over or, stoop shoulder or your eyes down low. You see people all the time who can't look you in the eye or their head's always hanging down. Well, Stand up straight and look straight ahead when you do things. When you talk to someone, look them directly in the eye. I watch for this all the time. And most of the time I find that 90% of the people can't look you in the eye consistently. They'll look at you in the eye, then look away, and they look the other way. Some people have to look down all the time. These are people with a definite lack of confidence. They don't have any power in their thoughts. There's very little force to what they're really thinking. They're embarrassed. They're wandering off. They can't look you straight in the eye and really communicate with you 100%. That's important. Watch yourself as you do that, and just notice how you do it. You might not even be aware of how you look away a lot when you're talking to someone and kind of daydream. You just make the casual eye contact, so just enough so that they know you're talking to them. But work on that. Look directly into the eyes of the other person when you're talking. And another key that goes along with is accurately observe nature and all of its surroundings. Now, we don't do that. We go through life just recognizing things. Oh, there's a car, there's a tree, there's a stop sign, blah, blah, blah. Start taking the time to accurately observe nature and your surroundings around you without making judgments about it. Just as we discussed in the meditative immersion, let nature speak to you. Learn to observe and learn to hear from the world around you. Okay. He also has in there what he calls, or I call it anyway, the 10 ideas of good spiritual health. He calls them like laws and so forth, but I prefer to think of them as just kind of good ideas that are helpful for a person. You might want to write these down even on a piece of paper and just kind of hang it on the wall, because these are basic ideas that you can keep aware of and work into your daily or weekly practice of life, and they will be of benefit to you to help you keep kind of a healthier, happier spiritual life. The first one is to spend a lot of time out of doors. Take in as much fresh air as possible. Take long hikes or strolls into the woods. Now, this is especially a good one for me because I've spent the last 8-10 years being a computer programmer by profession, and I have spent more than my share of time in a small room somewhere at a computer screen, forgetting what time it is and what it looks like outside. So it's kind of a lonely profession where most of my work is just by myself. And I continually have to tell myself to go outside, to stop every now and then. So I have to force myself to go get on my bicycle and ride to the post office or do something. So I'm a little guilty of this one. I keep rationalizing. I got to work a little harder, just a little longer. Got to finish this project, make just a little bit more money, get a few more hours in. Push, push, push. So I'm kind of guilty of that one. It's important to get out of doors, to mix with nature, to get out of your room, out of your office where you're at. You need fresh air. Besides, you need the sun to hit you at least an hour a day. The sun helps program the cells in your body, which keeps your body clock in balance. If you stay out of the sun too much, your body clock gets off. You start wanting to stay up irregular hours, and your sleep suffers from it. So the sun has to hit your body, usually a minimum of an hour a day. So get outside. Okay? Number 2, shout out loud. Use a name that has special feeling for you, like a loved one or a role model. Now, here I don't mean in the house. I mean taking walks. Go out and take walks in the woods and so forth, and go hiking or wherever you need to, or maybe if you're a jogger, whatever you like to do, and shout out loud. Maybe shout a name of somebody that you like, or Rocky, or Marilyn Monroe, or whatever you want to shout out there. The idea is that by shouting, you loosen up the depressing feelings that are inside of you, and that tightness we get from being too enclosed or too negative about life. It'll make you feel freer, looser, and it'll make you act more cheerful. And if you have a sense of humor, you'll probably wind up laughing at yourself. Maybe you want to yell Bugs Bunny or Peter Rabbit or something silly that makes you, laugh a little bit. So what you're doing here is you're breaking an attitude. If you find yourself locked inside too much, not getting out enough, or things aren't going well, go for a nice walk and shout and yell. And you'll find that, it will change your attitude. While you're out hiking, sing happy songs. Try doing that. It works about the same as like the voice, and when you do it, sing out very loudly. Besides singing, rhythms and so forth and tones are good for the body. The sound, the vibration goes through the body and changes how you feel about things. Singing is good for us. Doesn't make any difference if you're any good at it. Doesn't make any difference if you can't carry a tune at all. Probably helps, because then if you can't sing at all, you'll probably break up laughing at yourself trying to sing something. But sing. It's exhilarating. It gets you into a cheerful, positive state of mind. Most importantly, it breaks up negative, depressed, closed-minded thinking. Try to walk barefoot as much as possible. I talked earlier about reflexology and how all of your the nerve endings in your feet are connected to different organs in your body. Do that. Go out and walk on uneven, grassy ground. Take those shoes off. And even take short runs if you want to jog the body up a little bit and stimulate your feet and your legs. After you've been walking or running, whatever you like to do, stop and rest on your walks. And when you stop and rest, engage in a beautiful daydream that causes you just to get lost in your fantasy. Maybe you see yourself as the world's greatest runner, the world's greatest scientist. You've just solved the mysteries of life or whatever it is. But learn to daydream well. Daydreams, we're not talking about, creating worlds that are impossible. I'm not talking about being led astray by fantasies. You don't want to become a fantasy head. The idea is, though, you want to be able to daydream and think of good ideas. Most of all of our good ideas come from daydreaming the impossible and knowing that it is possible, that we can go out and do it. So learn to daydream well. Just don't lose sight of reality. Okay, number 6, observe everything in detail when you're out there walking around. Look at those flowers and animals and trees and birds and everything that you're out there looking at. Precise observation of nature loosens up all these neutral and positive thoughts that are inside of you, kind of makes them flow around. Thereby they fasten themselves in your memory and develop concentration, and that leads to powerful thinking. In other words, what we want to do, carefully observe nature. Let it talk to you. See things as they really are. It will open up new ideas. It will break down some of your closed-mindedness that you have, and it forces your thinking to become more concentrated because you really see things the way they are. Number 7 is think honestly about your own actions and words. Be a critic of yourself. Most of us can't face ourselves. Most of us go out in the world and just say whatever we need to say to get ahead, or we look the one way or another, or we dress to impress people. And in our day-to-day society, a certain amount of that seems to be needed if you think that way. But for the most of us, for everybody, it's important that you be honest with yourself. Maybe you want to spend 2 or 3 minutes in front of the mirror every morning with no clothes on, just looking at yourself and being honest about yourself. Look in the mirror, look at your face, your hands, your belly, your rear end, your legs, your lips, whatever, and take a close analysis of yourself and be honest with yourself. The body you are living in is a reflection of how you think. Okay? Dwell on that one for a while. Number 8, secrets should be kept with confidence and integrity. If somebody tells you something and asks you to keep it a secret, most people can't do it. Or they might just say, well, don't tell anybody that, So you think later on, well, it wasn't a big secret. I'll just tell a little bit of that. That's pretty interesting stuff. Don't do that. Learn to really have integrity of self, with yourself and with your friends. It's important because as you build integrity, you know you have integrity, and that reaffirms your self-reliance and confidence about yourself. You feel better about yourself when you have integrity, because you know it. Work on that. It's a very strong thing. Number 9, always speak slowly and deliberately, but of course with control and friendliness. Well, we naturally speak more with control and more deliberately as the world becomes clearer to us. As you can approach life with clearer thinking, powerful thinking, and as you understand yourself better, you naturally will do that. But as you're working towards that, you can control yourself. Speak at a speed which is comfortable for you. Don't speak real fast where you kind of run off and then you kind of stutter, and you forget what you're going to say. A lot of people do that. They speak nervously, or they go so fast they kind of have to say something 4 times before they ever get their point across because they can't express themselves. Well, slow your mouth down so it's matched up with the speed of your brain. Okay? Number 10, absolute honesty and integrity with yourself and others is most important. Well, that's a dandy. That's probably the best one of all of them. If anything, we need a little more integrity in our world. Most people, unfortunately, have rationalized that integrity is not a big deal anymore. Money is the big deal. And we do whatever we need to do or whatever we need to say to get the money. If we're head of a corporation or a doctor, an attorney, or an architect, whatever we are, For most of us, we've learned to kind of skid around the rules and so forth and do whatever we need to do to get a little more money. Well, we know it's not the right thing to do, but it's the kind of society that we live in, at least right now. It may be changing rapidly. So that's 10 pretty good ideas for you there to help you through life. You may have your own way of wording them. You may even have, some of your own, but you might want to make out a list and hang it on the wall of just suggestive ideas based on these comments that kind of help you keep aware of yourself and your growth and how healthy you are in life. Okay, we're just about to wrap up these 2 tapes on developing and care of the psyche. I have a few ideas of my own I kind of want to give you in summary here for you to think about. Maybe just a few guidelines, kind of step by step, one you can go through to kind of like changing your life. And you don't need to write these down or anything unless you want to. First of all, I think you should start by developing a clear understanding and awareness of the idea of creation and its logic. On the 2 creation tapes, we go over that very clearly and explain about the idea of creation. I think it's important that we understand the logic of how our universe is coming forward. Of course, at this point, you and I technically don't have any way to verify that this is really happening, but start to have a little faith that later on that your spirit will develop powerfully enough to actually come in connection with it to reaffirm the idea. Look over and dwell on the idea of the 7 steps of development of human life. Think about it until it's clear and meaningful. Read over those steps and think about what they mean. Start enforcing the idea in your mind that we are spiritual beings going through material lives for a purpose and for a reason. That you and your persona right now, your personality, are actually adding information to this spiritual energy form. That you are a part of it. You might even want to consider the fact that once you pass on, that's all the input you as a personality can add to this spirit. What are you leaving for the next personality that your spirit's going to create? What did the last one leave for you? So you might want to look at it like that. Learn to practice the meditation exercise. That exercise, breathing through your nose, is wonderful for concentration. You have to learn to be able to concentrate on a single thing. If you cannot focus on thoughts and concentrate them on them, you can't build any sort of power in your thinking. You'll just run from thought to thought very fleetingly. Concentration is very important. Learn to develop clear thinking through your keen observation of the world around you. And that'll get better as you go along. Learn to really observe things and let them speak to you. See them as they really are and learn from them. Start using the meditation immersion techniques, using the candle, the glass, or whichever you like, and learn to actually immerse yourself down using the colors. Program your subconscious to understand what the colors mean and put some time into it. Do it regularly, every day, perhaps for 10 or 15 minutes or whatever you like to do. And you will notice immense force of self-will, and it will start to change your life. Learn to be honest with yourself and work on self-improvement. That's a real tough one. We all think we're going to do that, but most of us are so busy just being ourselves that we don't have any time for self-improvement. I'm hopeful that a lot of the things that I've been talking about here can provide you some inspiration and some logic and so forth, building blocks to start on your own self-improvement. We all want a happier, better life. Examine your own human condition, your emotions. Find where your psyche is. Sit down with a piece of paper and write out who you are. Write out all about your feelings and attitudes about life, your approach to life. That's what your psyche is. Learn to use the boomerang. Concentrate very strongly on a certain thought and send it out and wait. Wait for those feelings to come back. That boomerang effect that comes back that gives you a different kind of charge or idea about the thought that you sent out. And then learn to be honest with it. You can start reprogramming yourself then through meditation and daydreaming. When you're honest with discovery about yourself and you find that you have certain problems in certain areas, certain things you want to better about yourself, you can certainly do it. Develop the pause, as I called it, to constantly access your higher self and make it part of your daily life. Through meditation, you'll learn to be able to concentrate and develop that pause, that split second, where you've told yourself to allow the wisdom from your spiritual self to come over and give you a hunch, give you a good idea, and observe things very clearly before you move on. Constantly see all other life forms as a spiritual part of creation. They are. I mean, we're sharing this planet and this universe with all sorts of living beings. Right now we're mostly concerned on our own planet, but start looking most importantly at other people as spiritual beings on their own path of evolution. Don't look at it with your material mind making value judgments about, oh, they're fat or they're ugly or they're black or they're blue, whatever. Catch yourself doing this and stop it. Start looking at this individual and just see him as a spiritual being with no value judgments, and let him speak out to you. You'll feel his spirit. You'll feel his consciousness, and you'll look at him with a whole different light. Peace on earth will only be gained through this way, when we can all visualize each other as spiritual beings and learn to love one another through that. Always find a way to make your world a little better through your own input. Learn to love all things and strive to be happy. Always keep something going to keep you a creative part of yourself moving and an intellectual part of yourself moving. Force yourself, if you have to go out and learn to play a guitar, a piano, sing, whatever it takes. Look into some kind of science. Educate yourself. Don't let your brain get stagnant. Develop your own habits and discipline to constantly monitor and see yourself. What I mean is, watch out all the time for negative thoughts becoming part of you, where you say, I can't do it, or it's too tough, and so on. You can do anything that you can conceive. Strive to always try out new information. Keep that open mind. Allow the negative thoughts to come in, the positive thoughts, but just see them as they are. Crunch over them, try them out, boomerang them, whatever you need to do. But keep an open mind. It's not only a sign of intelligence, but it's the only way you're ever going to learn anything. Consider the other viewpoint. And lastly, before I leave you on this subject, let me leave you with kind of an unusual one. I want to suggest to you that you begin to start thinking about programming your spirit for your next lifetime. Think about how you may want to live it, what kind of wisdom you really want to pass on to your spirit for the next lifetime. When the next lifetime's personality comes along, it benefits from how you end this one. One thing, you can program your gender if you want to be male or female. Think about that. Think about perhaps how fast you'd like to come back or where. Start taking a hand in controlling your life cycles. Interesting idea. Well, I hope the information on these two tapes can be helpful to you in some point in your life. So learn to develop that psyche, learn to control your thoughts. Let's clean up the subconscious mind of the planet Earth. There's over 5 billion people on Earth. Imagine if all this kind of information could spread, and suddenly 10,000 people became clear, logical thinking people with strong will, creating a future based on love and wisdom and peace. And those 10,000 people affected 10,000 more. It became 100,000 and 1,000,000 and 1,000,000,000. My, within 10 years, perhaps we could get the entire planet thinking clearly and logically. That is the future of the planet Earth. And it's your call to have a hand in shaping that destiny. So first of all, get your own self together, get your own power together, and your subconscious then can start having an effect on the future of the planet Earth.